What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking Season 2, Episode 5, the series finale, so it seems, of WWE Ruthless Aggression, called Securing the Future. Obviously a fitting episode to close the show out on, with it talking all about OVW, Tough Enough, FCW, and NXT, kind of talking about the developmental territories, the many developmental territories that WWE's had, dating back to the late 90s. WWE had said back in early 2020 that I believe there would be 10 episodes of the show, starting with the first 5 early last year, and now this batch of 5 in late 2021. So I assume this is the last of Ruthless Aggression we'll get on the network, on Peacock, but if so, it was a very good show, and this was an awesome way of closing it out. So they open up the episode talking about the opening, kind of recapping the opening of the WWE Performance Center back in 2012. The timeline had said 2012, but they then said it opened in 2013, so I think they were talking about the initial announcement of the PC being built up in 2012 before it opened in 2013. But either way, it was seen as an investment of the future. But we go all the way back. That was the most recent, chapter in the development of WWE's future. But before that, you would have to go all the way back to 1997. That was when WWE started to form their own real developmental territory, creating talent, stuff like that. And it started as a ring and a warehouse in Stamford. WCW had the power plant at that point, so WWE realized, okay, we kind of need something of our own. Dr. Tom Pritchard was brought in to kind of help run the whole thing. Dory Funk Jr. was serving as a trainer as well. People that went through that warehouse in Stamford included Rock, Edge, Christian, Matt and Jeff Hardy, among many others. I saw Sean Stasiak in one of the clips there. That's a random name you probably don't remember. Edge talks about the limited resources they had on hand at this dingy warehouse. It wasn't really about the environment itself, but rather the trainers they had on hand to teach you everything you needed to know, Pat Patterson included. Angle was actually there when Christian was there. Christian recalls Angle having his first week of training, and that Angle quit his first week of training. Dory talks about how Angle had an ability to learn new things right off the bat. And Angle was talking about how he, took the bumps. He didn't like it. He felt like it was self-mutilation in a way, and it was difficult for him to go back. So on that note, we hear from Jim Cornette, obviously the brainchild of OVW, and he kind of created OVW. He knew that warehouse in Stamford wasn't an ideal environment for these talents to be coming up in and learning the ropes and whatnot, so he and Danny Davis kind of captained this OVW experiment. Now, we don't hear from Danny Davis here. I actually interviewed Davis back in October for a convention that was coming up here in CT at that point. Great guy. Got a chance to meet him about a month later. A really nice guy. Would have been cool had they gotten him for this as well. I don't know how involved he really was in the OVW process as much as Cornette was, but it would have been cool to hear from him here. Nonetheless, Cornette talked about how he was willing to supervise this program, even if it meant taking a pay cut. And I think Vince liked that idea, he said, of him taking a pay cut. If it meant paying him less, they were willing to do whatever it took to invest in the future of their talent. So that's exactly what they did. It started out as a 6-month experiment, but it turned into 8 years. We hear from Shelton Benjamin, who did not do the indies before joining WWE in the early 2000s. He went right from collegiate wrestling in college to WWE. So he didn't know what the indies were. He didn't really know what to expect coming to WWE. He kind of thought it would be something along the lines of the power plant. That's not what OVW was at first. We hear from Benjamin. We hear from Batista, John Cena, Randy Orton, all talking about their experiences at OVW first coming in. Batista was the one who opened the door for Orton. And Orton was like, what the hell am I getting myself into? Because Batista was a monster even back then. And Batista called each and every person who came through that system studs. Cornette said that Benjamin was the best wrestler and best athlete of the bunch at that point. Lesnar was the most intimidating. John Cena could cut a professional promo of someone that was on the roster for 20 years. Randy Orton knew the business inside and out because it was in his blood, being a multi-generational talent. And Batista was just the monster. So all these talents, according to Cena, were given a VHS library of study tape. And Cornette knew they needed to work in front of a crowd to get better and cut promos, and that's exactly what they did. So they used the TV tapings for the OVW TV show that aired at that point in that area as a training ground for these up-and-coming talents. And all of them involved in it felt like they were the future. But it was not only a breeding ground for the future, but also for people to kind of go back You kind of go back to this territory. Not go back to, but it's like when people go from the main roster to NXT. Whether or not they have a history in NXT or not, they're there to kind of relearn the ropes, get reacclimated to stuff, and so on and so forth. Big Show was one of those people in OVW in 2000. He was sent there to grow up, in his own words. He had just put on a lot of weight. Pritchard said it was because he wasn't really competing and on a regular schedule, so he kind of lost track of himself as far as his weight is concerned, and it kind of got out of hand. He had his own puke bucket, Cornette said, which was great. I guess every time he would throw up, they would leave it right outside the building for him to go throw up in, which was hilarious. It really allowed him to figure out what kind of talent he wanted to be. Mark Henry was the same exact way. He came into the company, was immediately pushed right to the main roster. He wasn't ready yet. He thought he was being punished by going to OVW, but it ended up being the best thing to ever happen to him, because it was there that he learned psychology. Even the APA, Farouk and Bradshaw went there for a while. Well, one of them was injured, and they had a nice little run there. Around the same time, they had Tough Enough debut in 2001. Al Snow was approached about it as one of the lead people behind the show and being a judge and a trainer. And reality shows were really booming at that point. You know, the stuff that Miz was involved in being first and foremost over on MTV. But WWE thought they could tap into that as well. Adam Cole loved the concept, and it really gave people an opportunity. And it was all real. Like, Triple H would kind of go in and out of character, but Al Snow said everything that happened on the show was 100% completely, actually authentic and real. That's what Tough Enough was. And if they weren't a fan of the business, they gained a newfound respect for wrestlers. If you already were a fan of wrestling, then you gained even more respect for what wrestlers do. Maven and Nydia were among the ones to win that first season of the show. They joined the roster soon after. You know, Maven got that big Royal Rumble elimination in early 2002. He did fairly well for himself for the few years he was in the company. Nydia was with Jamie Noble for a while others struggled to transition. Chris Nowinski was one of them. They kind of pointed him out. I don't remember him being terrible, but he had that Harvard gimmick. He wasn't there for very long. My most memorable memory, I guess, of Nowinski would be that Survivor Series 2002 segment where he got tossed out of the ring with Matt Hardy by Scott Steiner. People like him, Jackie Gata first and foremost, were still very green coming off of Tough Enough. They were put in a tag team match on Raw. I forgot who Trish teamed with, but it was Trish and someone else. And we see clips of this mixed tag team match from Raw at that point where it was Gata and Trish in the ring. And it was fucking terrible because Gata was so green and not good. And Adam Cole, I think, was either in the audience or just watching as a fan and felt really bad for them because they just didn't really know any better. So JBL talks about how they were at a disadvantage having to learn on TV on the fly. And some people thrive under that pressure. Some other people need more seasoning, and they were among those people because they didn't go to OVW first. They went right from Tough Enough to the main roster. Meanwhile, the OVW stars, people like Lesnar, Batista, Cena, Orton, Benjamin, were all ready to take the main roster by storm. Lesnar was ready to go by the time he was called up by March of 2002. Orton was also a part of that first wave when he was called up in April of 2002. Batista debuted in May on SmackDown. Cena debuted in June on SmackDown. So it was really like one after another. Benjamin felt he was ready by the time he was called up in December of 2002 to be a part of Team Angle. And he called it one of the best days of his life. He was really trying hard to hide being giddy on camera because he was supposed to be this menacing, mean heel at that point. Tough Enough also led to more successful careers, including John Morrison, who won the fourth season. Among other people, Ryback was on Tough Enough, wouldn't win it, but he would go on to become successful years later. Many other people as well. The Boogeyman was on Tough Enough. They showed Byron Saxton. I don't know if he was on the show, but he sent in a video, which is hysterical. He would join WWE years later as an announcer and compete on and off in FCW. But anyway, they talk about Tough Enough leading to more successful careers, and Al Snow was really proud of The Miz. John Morrison called it a very intense time in his life, probably one of the most intense ever. And Edge argues, listen, they paid their dues. They paid it in a different way, but they still paid their dues. And Al Snow argues they earned everything they got. The OVW stars at that point, by the mid-2000s, were carrying the company. Brock was a multi-time WWE champion. John Cena was a multi-time WWE champion. Batista was a multi-time World Heavyweight champion. Orton was winning his first World Championship at SummerSlam 2004. And yes, they do show him RKOing Chris Benoit and holding the championship. So they show Benoit very briefly. I'm surprised they even showed him at all, but that's what we got of Benoit in this episode for those curious. But from there, we hear from Seth Rollins, who praises that once-in-a-lifetime crop of talent, that we will probably never see that again. People like Cena, Batista, Orton, Lesnar, all coming up simultaneously. Just incredible. And Mickie James admits that that next crop of talent from OVW, people like herself, Santino, Boogeyman, among others, Bobby Lashley, all felt the pressure to kind of carry on in their footsteps. Again, like I said, Lashley was among them, as well as Dolph Ziggler, as Nick Nemeth at that point. He said learning the basics in OVW at that point was huge. Santino called it an incredible place where people can make their dreams come true. And Cornette argues that it would not have been ruthless aggression in WWE without OVW. And WWE partnered later on with Deep South in 05, FCW in 07. That led to the creation of FCW being their go-to developmental territory in the late 2000s, as well as NXT in the early 2010s. They point out how the WrestleMania 27 main event, which I guess I had never really realized, but the WrestleMania 27 main event featured talent from Tough Enough, OVW, and the Stanford Warehouse. In The Miz being from Tough Enough, Cena being an OVW graduate, and Rock being trained in the warehouse in Stanford. Now, Rock was not wrestling in that WrestleMania 27 main event. They like to pretend it was a fucking triple threat by the time. But by the way that this company talks about that match, it was basically a triple threat. But Rock had just gotten involved. He was the focal point of that match. He was technically involved, but that's still pretty crazy. Miz says there's no feeling quite like main eventing a WrestleMania. And Brian Gewirtz talks about how both Cena and Miz evolved so much, as well as The Rock from his time in Stanford or the warehouse in the late 90s. Triple H wanted to create a system that enticed people to be a part of WWE. Brian Gewirtz would have never expected it to be this soon, that they had a facility so grand and so intricate in creating talent. And then Triple H kind of talks about the developmental process over the last couple of years and giving them all the tools they need to be successful. So that was not the end on here. The last thing we hear actually was Triple H saying the future is now as they open up TakeOver Brooklyn in 2015, which is such a sad show looking back on it. I mean, you look at that show now, it's just, I mean, I guess most of those people, unlike some of the talent from like the later takeovers, but even that one, Blake and Murphy, both gone, Vaudevillains gone, Sasha and Bayley have been successful, obviously, but Balor and Owens have been successful, but Owens is probably on his way out. Balor just doesn't feel real special anymore. Breeze is gone, Liger's gone, Dillinger's gone, Cruz is still there, barely, but he's there. Just a sad show to look back on now, but still one of the best takeovers they've ever done. But nonetheless, this was a great episode, a wonderful way of capping it off, talking about the future of WWE, which is kind of in doubt right now that NXT is being rebranded. I'm shocked they didn't talk about that, but maybe because it was so... This footage was from a while ago. They do show a clip of Big E as WWE Champion, but who knows when they had filmed all the interviews and whatnot. So NXT 2.0 is really revamping the developmental process, and Triple H isn't really even a part of it currently. Not by his choice, it's just a health thing, but it's still kind of crazy thinking back on it now. But nonetheless, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to check out these reviews. I appreciate it. I know it took a while, but we finally got all the reviews up of Ruthless Aggression, even dating back to Season 1 from last year, all right here on the channel. If you want to hear my other reviews of the other episodes of this show, in the description box down below right here on WWE Network and Chill. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content, including subscribing, or rather hitting that bell button to be notified every time a new video goes up. As I said on hashtag AskGSM earlier, we got Xia Li ahead of her SmackDown debut this Friday here on the channel on Friday as well. Talking about our debut, time in NXT, and so much more, so stay tuned for that. And other exclusive interviews coming here to the channel in the days and weeks to come. Have an awesome one, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.